Welcome to the Sustainability Podcast. My name is Cindi Muriuki. I'm your host for the day. And today I'm joined by Teddy Kinyanjui, the founder of Seedballs Kenya, a revolutionary company trying to regenerate forests using seedball technology. Welcome, Teddy.
Great. Thank you very much, Cindy.
Next.
Pleasure to be here.
We're excited to have you on this podcast. I wanted to ask you about these seedballs. What exactly are they? What inspired you to start them? Could you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So my late father, Maxwell Kinyanjui, he invented the Kenya ceramic jiko, so a little small stove that I'm sure most people either have one or definitely know of them. Because if you know, before the early 80s, almost all the jikos were only just pure mabati and sheet metal. So they'd waste a lot of energy to the sides. So he was on a team of engineers from the University of Nairobi and Ministry of Energy to design a clay-lined jiko to reduce charcoal use by 50% to focus the heat now to the pot. So once they designed the Kenya ceramic jiko, which was about the time when I was sort of born, so I can remember as a little kid spending hours with him in the backyard, and we'd be boiling water and measuring the sufurias and the charcoal and whatever. Then he'd give out the different designs to like a women's group for a month, and then come back and ask them, how is it? Is it too short? Is it too tall? Is your food cooked slowly, fast, whatever. So then it really was one of those user-focused design sort of things. So in a way, he was part of the designer, but there are also hundreds of ladies who were cooking with him that were the actual designers. From that, and it became now probably one of the most successful improved stove projects probably all over Africa, actually. He went to everywhere from Sudan to Malawi to Goma to, you name it, training potters and sheet metal people, how not to make a completely new jiko, but mostly how to improve what they were already using. So it's within their cultural, acceptability. Because if you cook, big sufuria, you can't have a small jiko. So you need to make something that suits
different sizes
your type of cooking. From that, he really noticed that almost everywhere people boil or they fry food. There's not that much baking. And so designed a charcoal baking oven. A lot with my mom, because she was, of course, a baker in the family, so she was always trying all these different things. And then from that one, then we designed, so the seedball thing has sort of come in reverse almost. Then we designed these charcoal making kilns to help people who, especially businesses, if you are using charcoal, how do you make it without cutting down trees? So we have this simple little kiln, it's like a big barrel, and you can prune off all your twigs and your branches. You can use prunings from coffee, bamboo, agricultural waste like maize cobs to make your own charcoal so you don't have to buy it. From that, we started thinking about, well, then how do you actually grow a tree? How do you grow a bag of charcoal? Like we've all seen the bags of charcoals on the side of the road. What are the agronomics behind it? If you're growing potatoes, tomatoes, if after 30 days I put this much money, this is this. But not so much for indigenous trees, especially acacia types in dryland areas for charcoal production, which is the majority of the charcoal for urban areas comes from those type of landscapes. So initially, in the early 2000s, we went to a couple different government agencies and asked, how do you grow a bag of charcoal? We want to be mukulimo ya maka. They're like, what do you mean a charcoal farmer? We've never heard of this before anyway. So there wasn't that much info from them, because typically the forestry practices here are what we'd almost sort of call the colonial style of, you do straight lines in the highlands of eucalyptus and cypress and pine, only exotic species, 3 meters, but which, if you're growing that type of forestry, that's the prescribed method for management. But for a lot of looking at the dryland areas, the Kajiado, Kitui, Isiolo, these type of places where charcoal is predominantly made from indigenous dryland acacia trees, there was not very much information on the silviculture sort of management aspect of those type of forests and woodlands. So we started doing all these experiments with guys who own the Carnivore, because of course they use charcoal, and Martin Dunford and my dad were old buddies, and they'd say, if there's no more charcoal, no more barbecue, no more jikos,
no more guests,
and it's literally one of the only energy sources that we can grow. You can't grow wind, you can't grow whatever, but you can grow trees sustainably and get all these other benefits from them during that process. So we started doing all these tests of, some people said if you plant a tree, if you're going to grow a tree, you have to do a square hole 3 feet by 3 feet. And other people said, no, you have to do a round hole. No, chicken manure. No, goat's manure. So we did all these different trials and tests from about mid-2000s, early 2000s out in Kitengela and then in Isinya. to really find, what works in those type of ecosystems and environments.
Yeah.
We more or less found that when you're using regular seedlings in a little plastic bag, it's about 150 shillings over 10 or 12 years that you can get one acacia tree that's big enough that you can prune all the branches and get one bag of charcoal.
Okay.
And the benefit of doing the pruning is for a lot of the acacia trees, the branches now grow back in less time because the root system's are already established and stuff. So a few people had heard about, the Kinyanjuis, they do this tree planting out in the dryland areas. So it picked up a few tree planting and tree growing contracts for, you had 5 acres, you weren't using it, wanted to plant some trees on it.
Yeah.
Come and contact us. So the Seedballs came about when we were doing a tree planting contract somewhere near Mololongo, just by the highway. And I can always remember, especially the logistics in doing a large amount of trees at once. It's one thing to plant 3 or 4 in your backyard. You can look after them. You can carry them in one hand.
True.
When you're doing 3,000 or 4,000, suddenly you need a pickup and you're trying to do it in the rainy season. Now the roads are washed out. And I remember the car was stuck. And, there are all these issues, especially on a large scale. And I think we were costing it out at about 40 to 50 shillings just for initial planting per tree.
Okay.
And I can remember looking on the side of the highway, just there going into Mololongo, and all those guys from the highway authority who were clearing all the grass and stuff, noticed one of them was really struggling. So I sort of went over to look, and lo and behold, he is cutting down the exact same type of seedlings that we're paying money to plant 2 meters away. And I started thinking, wait, these acacia trees are growing like weeds on the side of the road. What on earth am I doing with plastic bags and djembes and watering cans and all this maneno to grow a tree that literally is growing like a weed right over there?
Yeah.
And I can remember kind of looking up and looking at Nairobi National Park and starting to think, well, wait a minute, where did all of those trees come from? Because almost all the indigenous old growth trees, no one was planting them with plastic bags 100 years ago. It's a lucky seed in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
So that got me very excited. Okay, I'll go. So I went to Kefri. It's been really great to work with. Bought a whole bunch of different indigenous tree seeds. Went out to our little plot in Isinya, dug up the ground, did some, left it, did a couple of control plots, threw all the seeds out, and the rains failed. And so, of course, seeds are food for so many different, especially indigenous seeds. So the squirrels eat them, the mice eat them, the guinea fowl eat them. There's a long list of seed predators in the woodland savannas. So that made me think, okay, there's sort of 2 options here. You can either throw out so many seeds that everything gets full and then leaves what's left, but that's impractical and very expensive. Or figure out a way to coat the seeds and protect them. And so that's what led me to asking an old friend of mine who started the briquetting business in Kenya. So wherever they sell charcoal in Nairobi, when they're unloading it and repacking it, typically about 10% of all of that charcoal that comes in is very fine dust that doesn't fit in the jiko. So there's usually no use. They just leave it on a big pile on the ground.
Okay.
So in the early 90s, this guy, Elson Karstad, he happened to really notice that, it's a problem in some areas. In the dry season, the wind blows it goes in everyone's eyes and stuff. It's chafu.
It's harmful.
It's just extra stuff in the market that people don't want.
Yeah.
So he came up with this idea of why don't we make charcoal briquettes? And he probably literally is the father of the charcoal briquetting business in Kenya. And this was in the early 90s. Developed this whole concept of using that waste charcoal dust, reconstituting it into briquettes for, water heating or keeping those chicken boilers and like kenchik, industrial use mostly, and a little bit for residential commercial.
Okay.
And so I'd known him for many years through our Jiko business. We'd buy briquettes, he'd buy Jikos, old buddies, love to talk about charcoal and everything. And so I asked him one time, could we figure out how to do invent a machine so we could start coating different types of indigenous seeds with charcoal dust and to do it on a huge scale, because we were thinking, how do you fill up like airplanes and chuck out tons of these things? And you can do them by hand, sure, but you'll do, half a kilo a day.
It'll take long.
And also QC and stuff. So he came up with this machine, invented, he's a very good inventor. Like at his desk, he has a little temperature log and a solar panel and a fan, and if it gets hot enough, the fan automatically comes on, and he just loves tinkering with things.
That's cool.
So he's come up with this machine for making these seed balls on a huge scale. And what's very interesting with buying that charcoal dust from all of those areas where it's left over is it's almost like a archaeological urban sort of dig site. So we've been able to find coins from the early 1920s. There's a little hole in the
What?
middle of them.
Really?
So
Yeah.
charcoal's been coming into Nairobi for more than 100 years now.
Okay,
Of
true.
course, because
Yeah.
that's what people cook on.
Yeah.
And even when, we know everyone can have gas, electricity, Sunday afternoon, you're still doing nyama choma on charcoal. There's certain things like githeri or chapatis, people will say, it only tastes good
when you
if
use a
it's
jiko.
cooked on a jiko.
Yes, yeah.
So there'll be that charcoal use that's always been there. We see it growing almost more because as urban areas grow, and it's an interesting thing. People sort of cook less for themselves. I don't have time. I'm a busy office guy. I can't go home and make beans for 2 hours or whatever. So everyone eats at eateries and hotels, which a lot of them use charcoal. It's cheaper and more reliable than electricity. And again, the flavor side of it. So looking at all that waste that comes into Nairobi, I think it's, if you just do rough numbers of 6 million people, say even 1 million people use half a kilo of charcoal a day, that's 500,000 kilos.
Yeah.
It's a lot. And
That's
so
a lot.
10% of that is leftover dust.
Yeah.
So the nice thing with that is nothing eats charcoal in the wild. It doesn't have any nutrients, doesn't taste like anything. We've tested it with all sorts, little birds, baboons, vervet monkeys, you name it.
No
Things
one,
will pick
like-
it up, they'll look at it, smell it,
And then
chuck
throw it
it.
away.
It doesn't taste like anything. And being non-toxic and good for the soil is actually very, because, with seed coatings, you're looking at, we don't want to do chemicals. If it's like a birthday party and all the kids are throwing seeds out, the last thing you need is more synthetic, whatever it is.
And them getting harmful chemicals.
So it's just charcoal dust and then some nutritious organic binders that hold it all together. And so once we developed the machine to make the seed balls, we started saying, what type of trees should we be focusing on? That was relatively simple to answer. We just, through our experience, said, well, what type of trees are mostly targeted and overexploited for charcoal? Very good quality wood. It doesn't ash too much, has a nice aroma, flavor, easy to light, burns long. There are a lot of things that like serious chefs look for in their charcoal supply. And it's almost always from different types of acacia trees.
Okay.
And so we focus mostly on dryland areas where wood fuel production for charcoal firewood is especially really damaging environments. And then in the last few years, what's become so interesting is now this demand for indigenous grass seeds for dryland areas. Because of course, even at best, assuming we hit all of our goals and targets that the government set, Kenya is still, even historically, maybe maximum 30% tree cover. So that leaves the rest of the 70% of the country, which is typically mosaic woodland, a few scattered acacia trees, but mostly different types of grasses. And the grass economy is absolutely huge once you get to start learning about it. You think livestock, provides, a huge portion of the national gross domestic product, employs millions and millions of people involved in livestock economies. In areas where there's been overgrazing, seeing the damages from erosion, from the floods that happen when the ground is bare. And what's been very interesting, seeing the typical buyer of the grass seeds has been a direct link with land subdivision. Suddenly there's so many people who've subdivided, got their 10 acres, women inheriting land in parts of Kenya where they didn't used to.
True.
And people saying, now I've got my little plot and I have 5 sheep, I need to get more grass. And we want to do indigenous grass because it's more resistant to drought. And these palatable ones so that our sheep get nice and fat. Of course, as a jiko maker, it makes perfect sense for us to do charcoal and also help people get better nyama in the long run. But that's been a very interesting side of the business now that's been recently getting more developed, is looking at grassland restoration in addition to forests and trees, of course. And then for planting the seed balls, we said really the best way is to piggyback on, people, you're going on a hike with your friends, he's going cycling tomorrow. You have partners who are pilots, they're doing a patrol to look for illegal charcoal making. They can take some seeds with them of the right type of tree, get it to the right place. And so it's been really great working with all these different people who are so enthusiastic and see the need and want to do action right away, especially ones who understand this sort of assisted natural regeneration. How do you sort of work with nature to do what it's been doing for years and just give it a sort of step up in the right direction?
Okay, that's amazing. You've taught me so much I didn't know about charcoal, first of all, and jikos. And that's amazing to hear what you guys are doing. So you also, the seedball technology is also used for the grass seedlings as well. Okay, nice. So could you tell me why the seed balls are particularly effective in terms of sustainability. Yeah.
Yeah. So what we found was that back to that thing of the issue of seed predation. So on one hand, you can wait for that rain cloud to build up and you start thinking, okay, it'll rain in the next couple hours or days. And you go and throw out seeds. Perfect. If you can do that, all the better. But it starts getting tricky. If you don't, maybe you're going to only visit your grandma once a year. So now you can't make sure you're there when it rains, sort of thing. So for a lot of people, this idea of being able to distribute seeds year round is really effective because the fact that the seed now stays protected in its little ball of charcoal dust,
yes.
you can throw them out today and it will wait until the November rains in 4 months from now. And so that really opens up a huge window of especially this piggybacking with especially like our conservation partners.
Yeah.
If the rangers are in the field, it's hard to now deploy your ranger team only to go and do seed planting. If the ranger team is already doing patrols, community interactions, doing all this stuff, then they have a lot on their plate. But if they can just add a bag of seeds into the car, you can take it out and do it year round.
Yeah.
And that has been a really huge step of being able to get people planting, distributing seeds every day.
Okay.
And that's really the main thing from the seed balls is that you're able to get seeds out there and you're not just feeding the guinea fowls and the squirrels, which I think as any farmer who's listening knows poses a very big problem.
Yeah, and you've mentioned that the charcoal is not something that these guinea fowls or any other animal is interested in because it doesn't taste good to them. Okay, so that means they'll stay intact until it rains.
Until it rains, and the charcoal dissolves, and then the seed
starts to germinate.
Back to its own thing. So, depending on what type of seed, you'll get various success rates, various germination rates, and then of course depending on what environment the seed is growing in. And so, if you grow something on a path, the old parable, if the seed falls on the rocky path with the fertile soil, it's exactly that.
Yeah.
So you'll get much higher success rate in areas with good soil, good rainfall. What's the famous phrase is the best fertilizer is the shadow of the farmer. And if you're there checking on your plant every single day and weeding it and making sure
that
thing's going to do great.
Yeah, of course.
But now if you've ridden by on your bicycle or boda and you just chucked a seed out at an old charcoal thing, hard to go back and check on it. So you'll get, usually for those completely wild thrown ones, about 10% success rate. And then if planted on farm and looked after, anywhere from 50 to 80%, depending on species.
Okay. So it's lower maintenance than actually having to plant. In the rows, like you were saying.
Yeah,
but you still need to take care.
If you can. So for people, and the more you take care of it, the more your trees will be, and the healthier and stronger, faster they'll be.
Okay.
The big thing also is cost. So one seed ball is 1 shilling. And when we were doing the traditional tree planting, your seedling already is about 25 shillings. It's another 5 or 10 shillings to dig a hole, another 5 shillings to plant them. Then if the rains fail, you have to start watering everything. And in some areas, if the community doesn't even have drinking water, you can't expect people to carry water up a hill to put on a small tree.
True.
Especially when they're like, Cindi Muriuki, they're growing anyway.
They'll just grow anyway.
Or we've seen some places where people would actually chuck in like water bowsers to water the seedlings, and the local community doesn't have drinking water. And now they feel really done badly. I think that particular place, they went and killed all the seedlings. Because they're like, how can you bring in fresh, clean drinking water, pour it on the ground,
and not give us...
my mom has to carry it for 6 hours on her back.
It's unfortunate.
So for us, the thing with direct seeding is it lowers the cost. So even at 10%, you're getting a tree at about 8 shillings per tree, which is still less than a seedling. Moving them around is a lot more easy. I can remember once taking 1,000 seedlings to Narok in an old Land Rover, which broke down, ended up having to buy a new engine because it overheated. Because if you think 1,000 seedlings in 1 kilo bags is 1,000 kilos of soil.
Yeah.
They wanted trees. They didn't want soil from Nairobi. They wanted trees from Nairobi. So I started realizing carrying this huge amount of seedlings, very expensive, very tiresome. The seedlings all get hit by the wind and, there's mishandling and they start breaking off. And you think in just a little 1 kilo bag has 500 seed balls in it, suddenly, you can carry almost a small forest in like one pocket worth of seeds. So logistics make it a lot easier to distribute big amounts of seeds rather than large amounts of seedlings.
Interesting. How do you seem to foster collaboration. Can you share some of your current partnerships that combine seed balls with traditional tree planting?
We've got so many partners. It's so lovely. I don't want to leave anyone out, but I mean, everyone's great. It's just amazing to see what a huge difference in demographics we got sometimes. I think a year ago we had a priest, imam from a mosque, and a Hindu priest all come in the same day and buy some seed balls.
Really?
And I remember thinking, if this thing's cutting across 3 of the major religions,
Yeah.
this is pretty incredible that it's just about everyone is interested in seeing the need for growing more trees. And I think it's been a really big thing recently where people are noticing the droughts, the extreme heat, the floods that are happening. Also economically, we have a lot of customers who are just, I need trees for firewood.
Okay.
I'm a goat farmer and I need more acacias for my goats to eat in the dry season or whatever. So I think there's been a big push for people understanding how trees directly affect them. If you're a farmer, how you can profit by growing more trees and have more stable soils, all of the bees, what have you. And then what's been really nice to see is how many more people are more interested in indigenous trees and seeing all the benefits that indigenous trees produce versus only planting ornamental exotic ones.
Yeah.
And I think it's been one of those things for a long time in Kenya where things that are from overseas are the best. If it's from Dubai, if it's from the States,
it's the
Australia.
stereotype.
And yet, you got to imagine how many Americans or Australians have come to Kenya and are taking pictures of our flat top acacias. And they're not, they don't even,
Because
you
they
can't
don't
even
have those
imagine
either.
how wonderful that tree is to
Yeah.
certain people or baobabs or whatever. But economically speaking, those ones are also the best for integrating within our landscapes because you got some exotic trees that are actually invasive. So Lucina, the prosopis that they planted around Baringo, good intentions, but it's not suited to this climate or it's too suited to this climate and is now causing people negative issues.
That's my biggest problem with the tree planting
Is the
initiatives.
wrong species.
Yes,
or the thing just
exactly.
dies and everyone's like, you planted
You
a
wasted
jacaranda
it,
tree in
yeah.
Isiolo. Like, what do you expect?
Yeah.
But it's been really nice engaging with more and more of our partners and seeing how much more people are understanding, the resilience and strength and usefulness of growing indigenous trees. At the moment, our biggest partners, recent ones who've been very interesting to work with are some corporates, some local Kenyan corporates like CTM Tiles. They're doing a seed ball subscription.
Okay.
So at the end of every month, they'll donate 50 kilos of seed balls who we give out to all these different amazing, what we call regreening partners. So it's people we've met and worked with over the years.
That's nice.
Who we know are very happy. If I give you some seed balls, you can take them, you can go plant them, send back a photo, and then we can give it to the person who donated it to the group.
Yeah.
So anything from scouts to a group of madrasas in Kwale to Kibwezi well-wishers in Kibwezi to people in... Actually, I think we've probably planted seed balls in all 47 counties so far.
That's amazing.
And yeah, it's been so cool because, the power of things like podcasts and social media and people learning about it and seeing, how do I ship seedlings from Nairobi all the way up to Moyale? You can't, but you can send an envelope of seeds and it takes 100 shillings, goes overnight. And it's so easy,
Okay.
And so I think especially that logistical thing has really enabled that reach to spread quite far.
Nice. Could you explain the connection between reforestation and our daily lives as responsible citizens? Yeah.
I always like to put it through the lens of who doesn't like nyama choma. And everyone does. And nyama choma is entirely intrinsically tied to the charcoal from the trees, the food. Goats eat seed pods of certain types of acacia, and they become so incredibly fat, they'll like double in price in places like Samburu when it's after that sagram, that acacia seed season. And you see this thing that's just glossy and just tamu. And so I think really for most people that, as a basic sort of simple thing you can understand, what you eat, a lot of it is supported by indigenous trees, especially in the dry lands of Kenya. And in the arid and dry lands, which again comprise 70% of the whole country, those trees are, if you've ever been out in some of those places when it's hot, 38 Celsius at midday and you're no shade, it's just terrible, very trying. And so you can understand what a huge benefit things like the shade does. Of course, now honey from the trees, all those ecosystem services. But I think there is a bit of a disconnect at times from people in urban areas and where the resources are coming from into the urban areas. And not, you meet kids these days who think pineapples grow on trees or something. And milk comes in a plastic package and that's how it comes.
Yeah.
But it is very nice to think about with seed balls, especially, which we hadn't really seen at the beginning, was it being such a tool for fun. And because like for me, when I was a kid, when I went to school, if you did something wrong, tree planting was punishment. You had to carry bottles, you
Yeah,
had to
that's
carry
true.
water, you had to
And dig
go
a
and
hole.
palilia, and weed them.
Yeah.
And I can remember as a little 11-year-old kid, I was very naughty. Just thinking, this tree, it really gives me a lot of problems. All it is a negative sort of. But now what
And now
we've
you've
seen
turned it
with like,
positive.
especially things like, slingshots. And, for a little kid
Yes.
to have a slingshot, shoot these things left and right,
Shoot a
let
seedball.
1% even grow. That kid has had such a fun afternoon, has learned the name of a new tree, has spent a day outside, and I think that sort of enjoyment with doing positive things for the environment is something that's really, really important to culture with youth, because it can't just be, as all kids, you're just told no all the time for everything. That's like, I feel like my whole life as a child
Yeah.
was being told, no, don't do that.
Yeah. That's
So
why you
I
want to
think
be an adult so bad.
really nice to be
Yeah.
told, yes, you can do this, and go and do
Yes.
it and have so much fun. And so that's been such a cool thing of seeing, even 80-year-old people, they got a slingshot and this big smile on their face. And so taking away that sort of tree planting as punishment or hard, terrible manual labor.
Yeah.
Some schools, like the STEM teams, have come up and made drones that drop seed balls. One made
Yes.
a bag that sits on the camels, and when the camel's walking, it drops out grass seed balls one by one
That's
as
so
like the little science and
smart.
tech challenge and stuff. So
Wow.
those have been really cool, seeing people then using the seed balls as a tool to, even with CBC, how do
Yeah.
you test velocity? The thing is 1.5
Ah.
grams. If you shoot it at this speed, how many meters per second? So you can then build that into more engaging things that then also open up, people's minds for thinking about beyond just the trees kind of thing. And, to me, that's just great. It's so fun to see the cool things people think up and come up with for planting seed balls.
Yeah. So you guys here, if you like Nyamachoma, buy a seed ball.
The kilo
And
for kilo.
if you're a parent whose kid is naughty, buy a slingshot and a seed ball. How can people contribute to Seedballs Kenya?
Well, to us, the biggest thing is, just it's so fun to see support. It's amazing now in our 8th year, traveling in places and people saying, oh, seed balls, we know those. In fact, come look, this is my tree that I planted from one. And that's now, of course, happening more and more as they're getting bigger. For directly, you can buy a bag of seed balls. They're 500 shillings a kilo, and each kilo has 500 seed balls. So they're basically a shilling
That's a
each.
shilling each, yeah.
Or you could buy a ton if you want. You can buy as many as you want. Like I said, with the seed ball subscription service, we're getting more people who, if they're not able to plant but still want to support, will buy seed balls for us to give to our different partners around
Yes.
Kenya.
Yes.
And it's so nice through, especially modern digital everything. You can get your WhatsApp pin, your WhatsApp photo through Google My Maps. We'll send a link of where all of your seed balls have been planted over the years. And so it's very nice for being able to do that connection and follow up with people for, pennies on the dollar. Just through a bit of data, you can suddenly get all these good reporting matrices back and stuff. And then to me, one of the biggest things is get outside. The best way to learn about your environment and the trees and the plants around you is go for long walks and make sure you stop and talk to as many people as you can, especially elderly people. And, especially now in Kenya, in rural areas where a lot of the youth have moved to the urban centers. For older people, it's such a wonderful connection to be able to explain the local name of a tree, 5 different uses. This one actually makes really nice tea and has good fruits and whatever. And then for all of us to learn those things, because with a lot of those oral histories and knowledge, if we're not learning it the way that everyone knows the 9 names of the people in Squid Games,
Yeah.
like you want kids to know the 9 names of important trees
Yes.
that directly affect their life, as well as all the football players in Arsenal or whatever it is. So I think that connection with nature, and just by doing it, is very enjoyable. It's good for your heart. It's exercise. Get out, walk around, see a lot of beautiful things. We have to remember we have 1, 2, 3 million people a year who've saved up their whole life to come to Kenya for 5 days. We don't just live in any old country. We live in one of the most special, beautiful countries in the whole world. And to be able to go and enjoy it, I mean, what a gem that we all
Yeah,
have.
true. Could you share some practical, sustainable living tips that our listeners can incorporate to their daily routines?
Ours has been a very interesting thing with my family and my 2 older sisters, who are really leading this charge with their company, Provisions Kenya. They're really into all health and wellness and how do we live a less impactful and, life on our environment and societies. And really the biggest thing that I've learned from it is, the 3 R's, reuse, recycle. But the biggest one is refuse. And, always look at something like 5 different times before you buy it. And I think being a very sustainable consumer, it means, one feels like you have to go with less, but you actually are not. There's a lot of stuff that I've bought in my life that I look back and just think, what?
I didn't need that.
I didn't need it. Didn't barely used it. Where did that money go? Who's that company? Who owns that company? How is that affecting me? What they're doing with my hard-earned money that I gave to Coca-Cola, and now the rivers are filled with plastic bottles. And so I think a big step is find out which things you can happily, live without. And you'll find that actually less is more, I find, in life. And it really is. The things that you do have, you'll value more. You spent more time choosing them. And that's probably the simplest, sort of lowest hanging fruit, I think. And then really the other one is vote correctly. Get out there and do your best.
I support and endorse this message wholeheartedly.
What can you do? Yeah.
Vote correctly. It will impact our lives, I promise. Okay.
That said, I voted for this administration because one of the things in their manifest was reforming the charcoal trade. And they admitted 30% of the price of charcoal is bribes.
Yeah.
It employs over 1 million Kenyans, and it's as big as the tea industry, economically speaking. And they've said, we're going to do agroforestry, woodlots, improved kilns, and formalize the charcoal trade so that all the people who are in it are not default criminals. Because as soon as they banned the transport of charcoal, it meant anyone doing it was doing it illegally. So now, how do we move from that to having our charcoal producer associations? Everyone has NHIF. If you cut your foot, you got health care. You're not hiding from the police because you're doing
it illegally,
cutting your own trees on your own land. By the way, suddenly that's become a gray area, which means only the cartels make cash from it. And, here's this energy source that 60-70% of every Kenyan uses in some form or way every single day of the year. And so I thought I was voting correctly.
Have they delivered? Have they delivered though? Is there even like a percentage of progress?
On reforming and making the charcoal trade sustainable, not that I've seen yet.
We hope for the best.
We hope for the best.
We hope that's all we can do. This is actually our last question. What are your aspirations for expanding Seedballs Kenya's impact in the future?
Well, increasing our species offering is a big one. There are more than 1,200 species of trees in Kenya alone. 200 of them are rare or threatened. And, we think of elephants and rhinos being endangered. There are plants under our feet every day that are equally as endangered, but do not get the same press or level of funding. And so as we're working more towards looking at all the different types of trees and seeds that are able to be encapsulated, the same with the grasses. We're doing 3 types of grass, but in a healthy pasture land in somewhere northern Kenya, you probably have 60 different species of plants. Of those, half of them are palatable to livestock and bee forage and whatever. So I think really trying to double down and focus on expanding the biodiversity offering, of course, is a very big one. Encouraging more people to come up with more innovative ways. We're meeting with someone now who's made a home-built drone, completely just bought everything off Jumia, made the little dropper from like an old plastic water bottle, and I think cost is now under $100 to do that. And so, encouraging that type of thing of even if they uses that drone later for like looking for a lost cow or something, it's so cool that that level of tech has been able to come together using Seedballs as one of the, process
pilots,
and just continue doing what we're doing. We've always thought, like a tree, slow organic growth. A big giant baobab, it doesn't just happen overnight. Very slow.
Time.
Sometimes some branches fall off. Sometimes there's a drought. Sometimes there's a flood. And I think a lot of those parallels and analogies one can make with how trees are growing is very good to base your business in. Strong roots.
Strong roots are important.
Be happy to grow. Take advantage of the seasons. And it's been a really, really interesting journey doing the Seedballs with so many cool partners, like people I just can't even imagine we've been so lucky to work with and learn so much from their experiences, positive and negative. And so I think staying the course, keeping on what we're doing.
Oh, that's lovely. So we've actually come to an an end of this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us here and gracing our set. Could you tell people? Oh, we actually have
thanks.
some
You're
seed
right.
balls.
Great, yeah. And I brought you guys a bag of seed balls. So you
Yeah.
can see. So these are the seed balls. You
Yeah.
got each of your different species choice. So then we'll
Okay.
tick off what type it is.
Okay.
So typically we'd work backwards with whatever they chop down where you're from, grow more of the same thing.
Yes.
We'll do like a Nairobi mix for you guys. So I'm assuming you can plant them around here.
Okay.
We have a big thing of don't take seed balls out of Kenya because you shouldn't move seeds over borders without phytosanitary permits and such.
Okay.
A lot of people are like, I'm going to grow these in Finland. And
You're like, you
that
can't,
acacia tree is not going to do very well
and
in
it's also not
Finland.
going to grow. So.
And then just some basic tips. And we worked hard with the packaging. So everything is vegetable-based ink and this recycled brown paper. So the whole thing rots. And again, when I think about, some of these targets of 15 billion trees, is that 15 billion plastic bags? Can you imagine the mess that'll be left over?
And aren't those banned in this country?
They're banned anyway in this. So, again, doing direct seeding, it's a natural way. It's the way that these indigenous trees have spent 1 million years evolving to grow.
Yeah.
You get bigger roots, stronger roots from things that are direct seeded.
Yeah.
And just that fun aspect, honestly. It's great. And so I'll give those to you and enjoy.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Guys,
grow a bunch of trees.
We're going to grow some trees. Maybe we need another holiday. I don't know.
Yeah, anytime.
So could you tell us, or the audience at least, where we can find you, how they can, okay, you've already said that they can donate or buy their own. So just say it again so that it sticks in their minds.
We're just online at Seedballs Kenya on Instagram, all the various social medias. And then our main office is in Lower Kabete, and seedballskenya.com is the website. And then that number comes to me. So call me with any questions, comments, ideas you have about them. When we do get donations, we're always looking for keen new people who would be able to receive the seeds, plant them, and do follow-up and let us know how it's going, where they did them. And also, it's, come by anytime. Come by, come see the seeds, come see the trees. We have a few different permanent sampling plots around Kenya where we've been doing the seed balls over the years. And so we're opening up those soon for people to come to do camping and come and actually do like a little seed ball safari. And you get to see different trees, different types, because, there's so many ways to plant it. Do you dig a big hole? Do you dig a small hole? Do you use a stick? Do you use a panga? Do you just throw it? So it's been very nice looking at areas where you can do, especially repeat photos over a long time to see how those changes are happening.
True.
Yeah.
Okay, wow. Thank you once again for gracing our set. Guys, this was Teddy Kinyanjui, the founder of Seedballs Kenya. Be sure to check them out. And thank you for tuning into this episode. See you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.